The explosion shook the command bunker again. Commander Silthara gripped her crystal display as dust fell from the ceiling. The blue light from her communication device flickered, showing the same terrible numbers she had been staring at for weeks. 50,000 Vorthan soldiers, 200 war machines, endless supply lines. Against her 3,000 defenders and whatever ammunition they had left. "Commander, the eastern wall is failing," Lieutenant Kexran said. His scaled skin was pale with exhaustion. "The energy shields won't hold another hour." Silthara looked at the battle map floating above the table. Red dots showed Vorthan positions. They surrounded the colony completely. Blue dots showed her own forces, getting smaller every day. The siege had lasted 3 months. 3 months of watching her soldiers die while the enemy grew stronger. "How many casualties today?" she asked. 47 dead, 92 wounded. Kexran's voice was flat. He had stopped showing emotion weeks ago. "Medical says they can't treat any more serious injuries. We're out of healing crystals." The Zephyrians had always been proud of their bioengineered warriors. Each soldier could lift a ton. Their reflexes were 3 times faster than most species. Their crystal weapons could cut through any armor. For 200 years, they had never lost a battle. But the Vorthans were different. They didn't fight like living beings. They fought like machines because most of them were machines. When a Zephyrian crystal beam destroyed one of their soldiers, 2 more took its place. When their shields learned to block one type of weapon, they became immune to it forever. General Vexitor, the Vorthan commander, had sent a message yesterday: "Surrender now or face orbital bombardment." He gave them 1 week to decide. "Sir, there's a transmission coming in." "Communications," Officer Dalvin said. "It's from the Human Federation?" Silthara frowned. Humans were new to the galactic scene. First contact had happened only 5 years ago. Most species thought they were primitive. No crystal technology. No bioengineering. They still used metal and chemicals for everything. But they had been friendly during trade negotiations. "Put it through," she ordered. A hologram appeared. The human looked small and fragile compared to Zephyrians. No scales. No natural armor. No enhanced muscles. Just pink skin and thin hair. But his eyes were alert. "Commander Silthara, this is Ambassador Williams from the Human Federation. We received your distress signal." "Ambassador, I thank you for responding. But this is a military matter. We are under siege by the Vorthan Empire. Unless your Federation has military assets nearby, we might be able to help. Can you describe your situation?" Silthara almost laughed. What could humans do against Vorthans? But desperate people tried desperate things. She activated her tactical display. 50,000 enemy troops with adaptive technology. They learn from every attack we make. Our weapons become useless within hours. Their supply lines are perfect. Their coordination is flawless. We need... She paused. How could she ask this small, weak species for military aid? "We need any reinforcements you can spare. However small." The human nodded. "I understand. Let me speak with our military command." The transmission cut out. Kexran stared at the empty space where the hologram had been. "Sir, with respect, what can humans do? They barely have space travel." "They have ships," Silthara said. "Maybe they can evacuate some civilians." Another explosion rocked the bunker. This one was closer. The lights went out for a moment, then emergency power kicked in. Red warning lights bathed everything in blood-colored shadows. "Commander!" Dalvin shouted over the noise. "The humans are transmitting again." The ambassador reappeared. He looked the same, but something in his manner had changed. He seemed more focused now, more serious. "Commander, we can provide reinforcements. Estimated arrival time is 72 hours. "How many ships?" she asked. "1. "How many soldiers?" "Enough." The human's expression didn't change. "We recommend you pull your forces back to defensive positions and wait for our arrival. Do not attempt any offensive operations." The transmission ended before she could ask more questions. Kexran looked confused. One ship? How many soldiers can one ship carry? 100? 200? Does it matter? Silthara said. Every warm body helps, and maybe their ship has good sensors. They might be able to find Vorthon weak points we missed. She turned back to the tactical display. The red dots had moved closer during their conversation. The Vorthans never stopped advancing. They measured progress in meters per hour. But they never went backward. Pass the word to all units, she ordered. Help is coming. Hold positions for 3 more days. Yes, sir, Kexran said. But his tone suggested he thought 3 more days might as well be 3 more years. That night, Silthara stood on the command bunker's roof. The colony stretched out below her, dark except for emergency lights. Most buildings showed blast damage. The great crystal spire at the center, which had taken 50 years to grow, was cracked from Vorthan artillery. Above, the stars were wrong. 3 Vorthan battleships blocked out familiar constellations. Their running lights blinked with mechanical precision. Beautiful in their own way. But cold, alien in the worst sense. She had commanded this colony for 8 years. 15,000 Zephyrians called it home. Children played in the crystal gardens. Artists carved sculptures from living rock. Scientists studied the unique minerals in the planet's crust. All of that would end in 3 days if the humans couldn't help. And how could they? 1 ship against 3 battleships. A few hundred soldiers against 50,000. But humans had surprised everyone just by reaching the stars. Their technology was primitive, but it worked. Maybe they would surprise everyone again. A shooting star crossed the sky. For a moment, Silthara thought it might be the human ship arriving early. Then she realized it was just debris from the space battle 3 days ago. Pieces of her own fleet, still falling to the planet. She went back inside. Tomorrow would bring more attacks, more casualties, more impossible decisions. But maybe, just maybe, it would also bring humans. The space above Kepler 442 tore open like fabric ripping apart. Energy sparked and twisted as something massive pushed through from hyperspace. The Vorthan battleships immediately turned their sensors toward the disturbance. Unknown vessel detected. The Vorthan communications officer reported to General Vextor. Configuration unknown. Mass approximately 3 million tons. Vextor studied the readings. 3 million tons was significant, but not threatening. His smallest battleship was twice that size. Zephyrian reinforcements? Are negative, sir. The energy signature is completely alien. Hull composition appears to be refined metals rather than grown crystals. Humans, Vextor said. His mechanical voice processed the information. Intelligence reports indicated they were primitive. Maintain surveillance. Down on the planet, Commander Silthara received the same readings. She stared at the data in disbelief. 3 million tons. That was bigger than anything in her fleet had been. Sir, Communications Officer Dalven said. We're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel. A new hologram appeared. The human was different from the ambassador. Female. Wearing what looked like a military uniform. Her hair was pulled back severely, and her dark eyes seemed to take in everything at once. Commander Silthara, this is Colonel Sarah Chen of the UES Indomitable. We're here to provide assistance. Request permission to deploy ground forces. Colonel, this is unexpected. How many soldiers are you bringing? 800. Silthara felt her stomach drop. 800. Against 50,000 Vorthans. It was more than she had hoped for, but still impossible odds. Colonel, I must tell you. The enemy has overwhelming numerical superiority. 800 soldiers cannot. Ma'am, Colonel Chen interrupted gently. We understand the situation. Where would you like us to set up? Lieutenant Kexran leaned close to Silthara. Sir, should we tell them this is suicide? But something in the human colonel's voice made Silthara pause. Chen spoke like someone discussing a routine training exercise, not a desperate last stand. There's a clear area 2 kilometers south of the main colony, Silthara said finally. But Colonel, The Vorthans have been monitoring all approaches. They'll attack your forces the moment you land. Understood. We'll handle it. Chen out. The transmission ended. Kexran stared at the empty space. She seems very calm for someone about to die. An hour later, they watched the human ship deploy its forces. Drop pods fell like rain from the massive vessel. Each one carried 20 soldiers according to the readings. The Vorthans immediately opened fire with surface-to-air weapons. But something strange happened. The drop pods didn't follow predictable ballistics. They changed course in mid-air, dodging missiles that should have hit them. Some fired back with weapons that left bright streaks across the sky. How are they maneuvering? Kexran asked. Drop pods can't change direction. Apparently human ones can, Silthera said. The pods landed in perfect formation despite the enemy fire. Within minutes, a military camp appeared where there had been empty ground. Humans moved with mechanical precision. But unlike Vorthans, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. Sir, Dalven called out. Colonel Chen is requesting a tactical briefing. An hour later, Silthara and her staff met the human command team in person. She had expected them to be similar to the holograms. But seeing them in real life was different. They were smaller than Zephyrians, but they moved with a dangerous confidence. Colonel Chen introduced her officers. Sergeant Major Rodriguez had scars on his hands and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lieutenant Kim looked like she had never slept but was thinking about 3 things at once. Private Morrison seemed barely old enough to fight, but he carried weapons that looked heavier than he was. Let me show you what we're facing, Silthera said, activating the tactical display. Red dots filled the air around them. 50,000 Vorthan troops in fortified positions. Their technology adapts to any weapon we use. Their shields learn and improve constantly. Colonel Chen studied the display for exactly 20 minutes. She asked questions about supply lines, communication networks, and orbital support. She seemed particularly interested in things that weren't military targets. What about their power grid? She asked. Completely separate from ours, quantum-linked generators that can't be hacked. What about their food production? They don't eat. They're mostly mechanical. Spare parts, manufactured off-world and delivered by automated ships. Rodriguez leaned over to Kim. Sounds like a standard siege scenario. Easy mode, Kim agreed. Silthara stared at them. Easy mode? They outnumber us 60 to 1. Ma'am, Chen said. In human military doctrine, numerical superiority only matters if you're fighting the same kind of war your enemy expects. I don't understand. Chen stood up. We'll break the siege in 6 hours. Please keep your forces in defensive positions. We work better with room to maneuver. 6 hours? Kexran sputtered. Colonel, we've been fighting for 3 months. Different approaches, Rodriguez said cheerfully. You've been trying to fight them. We're going to break their stuff. The human officers left to prepare. Silthera watched them go, wondering if they were brilliant or insane. Outside, the human camp buzzed with activity. Soldiers checked weapons that looked nothing like crystal technology. Everything was metal and chemicals and moving parts, primitive by galactic standards, but the humans handled their equipment like it was part of their bodies. Sir, Private Morrison said to Rodriguez, the aliens seem pretty worried. They've been playing by the rules, Rodriguez replied, loading something into a device that definitely wasn't standard infantry equipment. Lucky for them, we don't know what rules are. Lieutenant Kim looked up from a device covered in blinking lights. Communication intercepts show the Vorthans are confused about our deployment pattern. Good, Chen said. Confusion is the first step. That evening, as the sun set over the besieged colony, the humans began moving out. They didn't head toward the Vorthan siege lines. Instead, they scattered in dozens of small groups, moving toward targets that weren't even on the military maps. Silthera watched from her command bunker as human soldiers disappeared into the landscape like ghosts. Their technology might be primitive, but their tactics were unlike anything she had ever seen. 6 hours, Colonel Chen had said. Silthara checked the chronometer. 5 hours and 37 minutes to go. The night was about to become very interesting. The first explosion happened at exactly midnight. Not at the siege lines, but 40 kilometers away at a Vorthan communications relay that no one had considered important. The blast lit up the horizon for 3 seconds before fading to darkness. General Vex Tor's mechanical eye focused on the tactical display. Report. Relay Station 7 is offline, his aide responded. Cause unknown. No enemy forces detected in that sector. Send a repair team. Yes, sir. 15 minutes later, the repair team found a crater where the relay had been. The explosion had been chemical, not energy-based. Old-fashioned and brutally effective, but there were no attackers to be found. At the same time, Sergeant Major Rodriguez was 30 kilometers away, placing small devices around a Vorthan supply depot. The devices looked like simple metal boxes. Nothing like the sophisticated energy weapons everyone else used. Charges set, he whispered into his communication device. Recommend all personnel maintain safe distance. Copy that, Sergeant Major, came Colonel Chen's voice. Light it up. Rodriguez pressed a button. The depot didn't just explode, it vaporized. The blast was so powerful that Vorthan sensors couldn't measure it properly. 200 tons of supplies and spare parts became a smoking crater. What was that? Asked Private Morrison, who was hidden in the hills 2 kilometers away. Chemistry, Rodriguez said with satisfaction. Amazing what you can do with the right molecular combinations. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Kim was having a conversation with a Vorthan war drone. Not through their communication systems, which were encrypted and impossible to hack. Instead, she had physically captured one of their smaller scout units and was connecting wires directly to its brain. This is fascinating, she told her team while working with tiny tools. Their AI is incredibly advanced, but it's designed to only receive orders, not question them. Can you reprogram it? Asked Corporal Williams. Better. I can make it think orders are coming from their own command center. Kim connected the last wire. There. Now it thinks all other drones are enemy units. She released the scout drone. It flew back toward Vorthan lines, broadcasting identification codes that marked every Vorthan unit as a hostile target. Within minutes, their own defense grid was shooting at their own forces. From her command bunker, Commander Silthera watched the chaos unfold. Red lights blinked out across her tactical display as Vorthan positions went dark one by one. But there were no blue lights showing human casualties. How are they doing this? Asked Lieutenant Kexran. Our sensors can't even track them. Human soldiers don't use energy signatures, Silthara realized. Their equipment is all passive. Metal and chemicals don't show up on quantum sensors. On the northern front, Colonel Chen was demonstrating why human snipers were feared by species that had never heard of kinetic weapons. The Vorthan officers had perfect energy shields that could stop any crystal beam or plasma bolt, but they couldn't stop a piece of metal moving at 3,000 meters per second. Target down, reported Sniper Johnson through the communication net. That makes 4 command officers in the last hour. Good shooting, Chen replied. Keep disrupting their coordination. The Vorthans were learning that their adaptive technology had a weakness. It could learn to defend against any weapon it had seen before. But humans used weapons that had been forgotten for thousands of years. Chemical explosives, kinetic projectiles, electromagnetic pulse devices, things so primitive that advanced civilizations had no defense against them. Sergeant Major Rodriguez was now inside a Vorthan power station. The facility was designed to be impossible to infiltrate. Quantum locks, energy barriers, automated defenses, but all of those required power to function, and power stations, no matter how advanced, still needed physical access points for maintenance. Maintenance shaft is smaller than expected, Rodriguez reported while crawling through a space barely wide enough for a human. Good thing we're not as big as our allies. He reached the main generator room. The quantum fusion reactor was a masterpiece of engineering, clean and efficient, and completely automated. It was also dependent on cooling systems that used very old-fashioned pipes and pumps. Rodriguez placed his charges on the cooling system, not the reactor itself. When they exploded, the reactor would shut down automatically to prevent overheating. Simple, effective, and impossible to predict if you were thinking like a machine, instead of like a human. Charges set. 30-second timer. All teams, clear the area, came Chen's voice. Rodriguez crawled back through the maintenance shaft as fast as he could move. Behind him, the explosions started small. Then the reactor detected the cooling failure and began emergency shutdown. Then backup systems tried to engage and failed because the backups used the same cooling pipes. Then the entire power grid for the northern siege lines went dark. 20 Vorthan positions suddenly found themselves without shields, sensors, or communications. Now, Chen ordered. Human assault teams that had been waiting in perfect silence opened fire from positions the Vorthans had never detected. But these weren't the crystal weapons or energy beams the enemy had learned to counter. These were solid metal bullets, shotgun pellets, and explosive grenades that worked the same way they had worked for 1,000 years. Private Morrison found himself face to face with a Vorthan warrior in close combat. The enemy soldier was bigger, stronger, and covered in armor that could deflect energy weapons. But Morrison's vibro knife went through the armor like it was made of paper, and his enhanced reflexes made him faster than the enemy's targeting systems could track. "Contact down," Morrison reported, breathing hard. "Good work, Private," came Rodriguez's voice. "How are you feeling?" "Like I want to do it again." In space, the Vorthan battleships were having their own problems. Their sensors kept losing track of the human ship. Not because it was stealthy, but because it was doing things no military vessel should be able to do. It moved like a fighter while hitting like a dreadnought. Its weapons were primitive kinetic cannons that somehow punched through shields designed to stop energy weapons. "Sir," the Vorthan communications officer reported to General Vextor, "we've lost contact with 47 ground units in the last hour." Vextor studied the tactical display. His perfect siege was developing holes like fabric being eaten by insects. Status of the human ground forces? Unknown. Our sensors cannot track them effectively. Casualties? 0 confirmed. Vextor's mechanical brain processed this information. An enemy force of 800 was destroying his siege of 50,000. Either his intelligence about human capabilities was wrong, or he had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of warfare itself. "Sir," another aide reported, "the humans are requesting communication." Colonel Chen's hologram appeared in the Vorthan command center. She looked exactly as calm as she had 6 hours ago. "General Vextor, I believe we should discuss terms." "Terms?" Tor's artificial voice carried a note of confusion. "You have 800 soldiers." "Yes. I have 50,000. You had 50,000. Current effective combat strength appears to be approximately 27,000 and declining." Vextor checked his own displays. She was right. How was she right? "What are your terms?" he asked. "Simple. Withdraw your forces from this system. We'll provide safe passage for your evacuation." "And if I refuse?" Chen's smile was polite and completely terrifying. "Then, in approximately 2 hours, you'll be trying to maintain a siege with no communications, no power grid, no supply lines, and no command structure. We'll still have 800 soldiers." Vextor calculated probabilities. His computer suggested that human tactical doctrine was incomprehensible but brutally effective. Further engagement would result in total defeat. "I require time to consider." "Of course. You have 1 hour." The transmission ended. In her command bunker, Commander Silthera stared at her tactical display. The siege that had lasted 3 months was falling apart in 6 hours, exactly as Colonel Chen had predicted. "Sir," Lieutenant Kexran said quietly, "what kind of species are humans?" Silthera watched more Vorthan positions go dark on her screen. "I think we're about to find out." General Vextor made his decision after 58 minutes. Rather than accept terms from a primitive species, he would demonstrate why the Vorthan Empire controlled 12 star systems. The time for conventional warfare had ended. "Deploy the Apex Warriors," he commanded. The Vorthan transport ship opened its cargo bay. 20 massive figures dropped toward the planet's surface, like falling meteors. Each Apex Warrior stood 10 feet tall and weighed 2 tons. Their biomechanical bodies combined the best of living tissue and advanced technology. They had never been defeated in combat, Commander Silthera watched them fall on her display. Colonel Chen. The Vorthans have deployed their elite forces. Apex warriors are. They're not normal soldiers. Each one can fight 100 troops. Chen's voice came back calm as always. Understood. Thank you for the information. Colonel, you need to withdraw your people. These things have killed entire armies. We'll handle it. Silthara wanted to scream. The humans had performed miracles in the last 6 hours, but Apex warriors were beyond any normal military solution. They were living weapons, designed by the greatest minds in the Vorthan Empire. The first Apex warrior landed in the middle of the human camp. Its massive form crushed equipment and scattered soldiers. Energy weapons built into its arms powered up with a sound like thunder. This would be a massacre. Private Morrison found himself 10 meters away from the creature. His rifle seemed like a toy compared to the monster in front of him. The Apex warrior turned toward him, sensors locking onto his heat signature. Contact! Morrison shouted into his radio. Hang tight, Private, came Sergeant Major Rodriguez's voice. Help is coming. The Apex warrior fired. Morrison threw himself sideways as the energy beam vaporized the ground where he had been standing. He rolled, came up running, and put everything he had learned in training into staying alive for the next 60 seconds. But 60 seconds later, he was still alive, and the cavalry had arrived. The human-powered armor suits had been stored in the cargo bay of the Indomitable. Colonel Chen had not mentioned them because the situation hadn't seemed to require them. Each suit was 12 feet tall, and armed with weapons that made Vorthan technology look primitive. Morrison, get clear, came Lieutenant Kim's voice. She was now piloting 8,000 pounds of armored destruction. Time to show these things what human engineering looks like. The Apex warrior turned toward this new threat. For the first time in its existence, it was looking up at an enemy instead of down. Kim's powered suit was bigger, faster, and armed with weapons the Apex warrior had never encountered. The battle lasted exactly 43 seconds. When it ended, there were pieces of Apex warriors scattered across a 100-meter radius. Target down, Kim reported. These things aren't nearly as tough as advertised. Similar fights were happening across the battlefield. 20 Apex warriors against 20 human-powered armor suits. The result was not even close. Human suits moved like dancers, hit like artillery, and used tactics the Vorthans couldn't predict. Sir, the Vorthanade reported to General Vextor, all Apex warriors have been eliminated. Vextor stared at his display. Impossible. But the sensor readings were clear. 20 minutes ago, he had deployed the most dangerous weapons in the Vorthan arsenal. Now they were scrap metal. Prepare for orbital bombardment, he ordered. If he couldn't win on the ground, he would glass the entire planet. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human ship. Colonel Chen appeared again. This time, she did not look calm. She looked annoyed. General Vextor, your deployment of weapons of mass destruction against civilian targets is a violation of galactic law. Please reconsider. The planet will be sterilized, Vextor replied. Your forces cannot prevent orbital bombardment. Actually, we can. I was hoping to avoid escalation, but you're not leaving us much choice. Chen turned to someone off-screen. Bridge, request permission to escalate to full battalion strength. What do you mean, full battalion strength? Vextor demanded. You have 800 soldiers. We have 800 soldiers on the ground, Chen corrected. The rest of our battalion strength is in orbit. The space around Kepler 442 suddenly became very crowded. Ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Not one ship, but dozens. Destroyers, cruisers, and something that made the Vorthan battleships look like toys. Sir, the Vorthan sensor officer reported, detecting multiple human vessels. Total mass. Sir, total mass exceeds our entire fleet by a factor of 6. Admiral Jackson's voice came over the communication system from the flagship Yorktown. General Vextor, this is Admiral Jackson of the Terran Third Fleet. You have 30 seconds to stand down or we will interpret your threat of orbital bombardment as an act of war against the Human Federation. Vextor checked his sensors again. The human fleet had appeared out of nowhere. His 3 battleships were now facing a force that could reduce them to atoms. How? He asked. Simple. Colonel Chen explained. The UES Indomitable is a light cruiser on a reconnaissance mission. We called for backup when you deployed weapons of mass destruction. The Third Fleet was conducting training exercises in the next system over. Training exercises? Vextor felt something that might have been fear. Your entire fleet was nearby for training exercises? Not our entire fleet, Admiral Jackson corrected. Just the Third Fleet. We have 7 others. The space battle, when it came, lasted 14 minutes. Human ships moved like nothing the Vorthans had ever seen. They used kinetic weapons, missile swarms, and electronic warfare systems that turned Vorthan advantages into weaknesses. The first Vorthan battleship surrendered when its main guns exploded from the inside. Someone had hacked their targeting systems and convinced the ship's computer that its own weapons were enemy targets. The second battleship lasted longer, but only because the humans were being careful not to destroy it completely. They wanted prisoners for intelligence gathering. The third battleship tried to flee. It made it almost to the hyperspace jump point before human interceptors caught up. The pursuit lasted 8 minutes and ended with the Vorthan ship drifting powerless in space. All Vorthan vessels have surrendered, Admiral Jackson reported. Boarding teams are securing prisoners and intelligence materials. On the planet, the siege was over. The remaining Vorthan ground forces surrendered when they realized their orbital support was gone. 50,000 soldiers laid down their weapons to 800 humans. In her command bunker, Commander Silthera watched Vorthan soldiers being marched to prisoner of war camps. 3 months of siege warfare had ended in less than 1 day. Colonel Chen, she said when the human officer visited to coordinate prisoner transfers, I need to ask something. When you said you were sending 800 soldiers, was that really your full response? Oh no, Chen replied. 800 soldiers was our reconnaissance force. If this had been a real emergency, we would have sent a regiment. How many soldiers are in a regiment? About 15,000, plus armor support, artillery, air support, and orbital fire support. Chen paused. We try not to use full regiment strength unless we're really worried about the outcome. Silthera stared at her. Colonel, what do humans consider a real emergency? Chen thought about it. Something that requires more than 1 regiment. How many regiments do you have? In the Third Fleet? 12. But the Federation has 47 fleets, so... Chen did quick math in her head. About 564 regiments, give or take. The numbers made no sense. If humans had that much military power, why were they unknown? Why did everyone think they were primitive? Colonel, how long has humanity been fighting wars in space? About 8 years. Before that, we mostly fought wars against each other. Chen smiled at some private memory. Good training. As it turns out, fighting humans is much harder than fighting aliens. Fighting humans is harder than fighting aliens. Sure, aliens think logically. Humans think creatively. That evening, Private Morrison was sharing field rations with Lieutenant Kexran while they guarded Vorthan prisoners. The alien officer seemed fascinated by human military doctrine. So you always attack the supply lines first? Kexran asked. Usually, Morrison replied. Hard to fight a war without ammunition and food, but the Vorthans don't need food. They're mechanical. They need spare parts. Same difference. Morrison offered Kexran some of his ration pack. The trick is figuring out what your enemy actually needs to function, then taking it away from them. And if that doesn't work, Morrison grinned. Then we call for backup. In space, Admiral Jackson was reviewing battle reports. The Vorthan technology was impressive, but it was designed to fight predictable enemies. Against humans, it had proven inadequate. His communication officer approached. Admiral, we're receiving priority messages from Fleet Command. 3 other systems are requesting assistance with minor piracy problems. How minor? Between 10 and 50 enemy ships each. Jackson nodded. Signal the task force. We'll handle them on the way back to base. He paused. And send a message to Colonel Chen. Tell her she did good work here. Yes, sir. Should I also commend her on the successful field test of the new powered armor? Field test? Jackson looked confused. Those suits have been in service for 2 years. The communication officer checked his notes. Sir, according to the mission briefing, this was supposed to be a testing deployment for equipment upgrades. Jackson realized what had happened. The Vorthans had faced what humans considered training equipment operated by a reconnaissance force during a field test of minor upgrades. Don't mention that in the official report, he said finally. No point in making our enemies feel worse than they already do. 6 months later, Commander Silthara stood in the same command bunker where she had made her desperate plea for help. But everything had changed. The walls had been rebuilt with human-supplied materials that were stronger than anything the Zephyrians had ever made. The tactical displays now showed friendly green dots across 3 star systems. The Kepler Defense Force had grown from 3,000 desperate defenders to 20,000 trained soldiers. Half were Zephyrians who had learned human tactics. The other half were volunteers from 6 different species who wanted to learn how humans fought wars. Commander, we're receiving a priority message, reported Lieutenant Kexran. He now wore the uniform of a Kepler Defense Force officer, with both Zephyrian and human insignia. It's from the Altair system. They're under attack by unknown forces. How many enemy ships? Silthara asked. Preliminary reports suggest 8 cruisers and 40 fighters. Silthara looked at her tactical display. 6 months ago, 8 enemy cruisers would have been an impossible threat. Now, she had 2 human destroyers, 4 upgraded Zephyrian vessels, and a mixed crew that had trained together for months. Signal all ships, she ordered. Prepare for immediate deployment. Estimated response time, 4 hours. Yes, sir. Should we request assistance from the 3rd Fleet? Not yet. Let's see if we can handle this ourselves first. The transformation had started with Colonel Chen's simple suggestion that humans and Zephyrians might fight better together than apart. Chen had remained on Kepler 442 to oversee the integration of human and alien military doctrines. The results had been remarkable. Zephyrians were naturally stronger and faster than humans, but they thought in predictable patterns. Humans were physically weaker, but their tactical thinking was completely unpredictable. Together, they created fighting units that were more effective than either species alone. Private Morrison, now Sergeant Morrison, was training a squad of young Zephyrians in close combat techniques. His students were bigger and stronger than him, but they couldn't match his creative thinking. Remember, he told them, your enemy expects you to use your natural advantages. So don't. Use their expectations against them. Opan. Opan. But, Sergeant, asked one of the trainees, if we're stronger, why not just overwhelm them? Because overwhelming force only works if your enemy lets you use it. Smart enemies won't let you play to your strengths. Morrison demonstrated with a training dummy. So you make them think you're going to do one thing, then do something else. The young Zephyrian tried the technique and managed to defeat a training scenario that had been impossible for his species before human training. Very good, Morrison said. Now try it again, but this time, make it weirder. Weirder, Sergeant? Humans win fights by being unpredictable. The weirder your solution, the less likely your enemy can counter it. 4. Meanwhile, Colonel Chen was in a meeting with Ambassador Williams, who had arrived to discuss the expansion of human-alien cooperation. The meeting also included General Thek Vor, who had replaced General Vex Tor as Vorthan military commander after Vex Tor's defeat had caused a political revolution in the Vorthan Empire. The prisoner exchange has been completed, General Thek Vor reported. All Vorthan personnel captured during the siege have been returned to our territory. How are they adjusting? Ambassador Williams asked. With difficulty. Many refuse to believe they were defeated by such a small force. Some think the official reports are propaganda. With difficulty their force-uben. With difficulty their propaganda. Colonel Chen poured coffee for everyone. The Vorthans had developed a taste for human beverages during their imprisonment. General, have you had a chance to review the tactical analysis we prepared? Yes. It was educational. I understand now why our doctrine failed. Thekvor looked uncomfortable. Our military thinking assumed that all species would fight the same way. Efficiently. Logically. Predictably. Most species do, Chen agreed. Humans are unusual. How unusual? Thekvor asked. Ambassador Williams answered. General, humans spent 5,000 years fighting wars against other humans. Every tactic that could be imagined was tried. Every weapon that could be built was built. Every strategy that could work was tested against people who were just as creative and unpredictable as the people using it. And then we went to space, Chen added, and discovered that every other species fights the same way. Logical deployment of superior technology in predictable patterns. It's like playing chess against someone who doesn't know the rules, Ambassador Williams continued. They make moves that should be impossible. But somehow they work. General Thekvor processed this information. Is this why the Human Federation has been so successful in other conflicts? What other conflicts? Chen asked. Intelligence reports suggest human forces have engaged hostile species in 12 different star systems in the past year. Chen and Williams exchanged glances. General, Williams said carefully, those weren't conflicts. Those were training exercises. Training exercises against live enemies? Well, they weren't supposed to be live enemies. Other species keep mistaking our training exercises for invasions. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from space. Admiral Jackson's face appeared on the holographic display. Colonel Chen, we have a situation developing in the Rigel sector. Unknown species with superior technology is expanding aggressively. 3 systems have gone dark in the last week. How bad is it? Chen asked. Bad enough that Fleet Command is considering deploying an entire fleet group. Chen's expression became serious. Sir, permission to accompany the deployment with Kepler Defense Force units. Granted, this might be good experience for your mixed crews. When the transmission ended, General Thekvor looked confused. Colonel, a fleet group is how many ships? Approximately 300 vessels, plus support craft. For one enemy species? We don't know how dangerous they are yet, Chen explained. Better to be prepared. Ambassador Williams leaned back in his chair. General, can I explain something about human military doctrine? Please. Humans learned a long time ago that the cost of winning a war is always less than the cost of losing one. So when we fight, we bring enough force to guarantee victory. How much force is enough? All of it, Chen said simply. We bring all of it. That evening, as the Kepler Defense Force prepared for deployment, Commander Silthara found herself on the rebuilt observation deck of her command center. The stars looked different now, not because the constellations had changed, but because she understood what was out there. Lieutenant Kexran joined her. Sir, the human ships are beautiful. Have you seen the way they move? Like they're alive, Silthara agreed. But also like they're hunting something. Do you think humans are naturally warriors? Silthara considered this. Over the past 6 months, she had learned that humans were artists, scientists, philosophers, and engineers. But when threatened, they became something else entirely. I think humans are naturally survivors, she said finally. They learned to be warriors because they had to. And they learned to be very, very good at it. The next morning, the Kepler Defense Force departed for the Rigel sector. The combined fleet of human and alien vessels moved with precision that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. Sergeant Morrison stood on the bridge of the destroyer, resilient, watching the stars streak by through hyperspace. Beside him, his Zephyrian squad members were checking their equipment with the same professional calm he remembered from his first mission. Sergeant, asked one of them, what do you think we'll find out there? Trouble, probably, Morrison replied. But we'll handle it. How can you be sure? Morrison thought about everything that had happened since that first desperate message for help. A siege that should have been hopeless. Enemies that should have been unbeatable. Problems that should have been impossible to solve. Because that's what humans do, he said. We handle it. In her quarters on the command ship, Colonel Chen was reviewing intelligence reports about the unknown enemy species. They used energy weapons that could penetrate any known shield. Their ships were faster than anything in the galactic database. They had conquered 3 systems without losing a single vessel. By the standards of most species, they would be unstoppable. Colonel Chen smiled and began planning the battle. By human standards, this would be an interesting challenge. Ambassador Williams was composing his monthly report to the Human Federation Council. He paused at the section about military deployments and tried to figure out how to explain recent events. The 734th Reconnaissance Battalion, he wrote, has successfully completed its mission to evaluate alien military capabilities. Initial contact protocols established. Allied Defense Force organized and trained. Region secured for future Federation interests. He paused, then added a personal note. Recommend continued small unit deployments for future contact missions. Large-scale deployment appears to cause anxiety among local species. He didn't mention that the small unit deployment had conquered a 12-system empire in 6 months, mostly by accident. Some things were better left unsaid. Years later, historians would call it the Kepler incident. The moment when the galaxy realized that humanity was not just another species with good technology, but something entirely new. A species that fought wars like they played games creatively, unpredictably, and with the absolute determination to win. But on that day, as the combined fleet jumped toward whatever waited in the Rigel sector, it was just another mission for a species that had never learned to accept impossible odds. The galaxy was a much more interesting place with humans in it. And for the first time in galactic history, the monsters were on someone else's side.